Okay, hi you guys. And for those of you new to joining me here today, my name is Shannon Windsor, and today I'm going to talk about Drainage 101 and the importance of following the Cellcore protocols. So this is part 2, and in my last video, I was talking about the importance of the drainage funnels starting at the colon. So when we look at the drainage funnel, we can see moving from the bottom up that the next pathway to discuss in the funnel is the liver and bile ducts. So in order for us to have a drainage system that's functioning from the top down as it should be, we need to start working on opening the drainage pathways from the bottom up. So here we have a really great image of the liver and gallbladder with its connection to the pancreas and small intestine. That's really my focus for today that I want to talk about. So you guys, the liver has this amazing ability to heal. And research shows that when disease or injury causes a shortage in any one type of liver cell, the organ can instruct other types of liver cells to change identities to provide replacement supplies to the liver, essentially, right? So studies also show that the liver cells switch their identity at a massive rate. And actually 70% of the metabolic processes occur in the liver. So if we're facing a stressor in our body and wondering where the root cause lies, we have a 70% chance that the liver is involved. So I just want to put up this image here that I borrowed from Cellcore Biosciences that I thought might be really helpful, where we can see the breakdown of phases 1 to 3 in the liver. So the liver actually goes through multiple phases, specifically when it comes to the role of detoxification. So you don't need to completely understand this, but I found that the further you get along in your journey, the more curious you become, and the more you want to understand what is going on when it comes to getting to the root cause. So you can see here that phase 1 is essentially concerned with oxidation, hydration, hydrolysis, and the like, and essentially what we can do in getting the metabolic process working better. And when you look at phase 2 is essentially the conjugation pathway. So this phase is like, how do we conjugate better? How do we need to get out of the way in order to move to phase 3? So this phase is about pushing everything out to the transportation. And each phase is actually going to be different for each person, depending on what they've been exposed to, depending on what they've gone through. So someone dealing with mold, for example, is likely to struggle more in phase 1, whereas people who struggle with methylation, glutathione conjugation, amino acid conjugation are likely going to struggle more in phase 2. And phase 3 is all about transportation. So this phase is really important because even if you get all of the other phases working, if you can't get it out, right, the transportation phase, phase 3, then it can create this toxic overload, which we're going to address more as we continue. So that is just a quick glance at the phases in the liver for now. Which can get extremely complex, as I'm sure you can imagine, but we don't necessarily need to go there right now, right? We don't need to know all that right now. So this is one of those videos where everything kind of comes together at the end. So, but it's important first to get a little understanding or a little recap of A&P. So looking at our liver image here again, a simplistic overview of the liver really is that the liver processes its toxins, it puts it in the bile needs to move those toxins, so it gets released, especially when food is there to neutralize the stomach acid, which we're going to talk more about, and then the digestive process continues. So let's have a look at the gallbladder. I think you're going to be blown away by the importance of the bile, which is stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. Now, bile emulsifies fat and transports toxins, but bile also neutralizes stomach acids in addition to sodium bicarbonate from the pancreas and bile ducts. So when we start thinking about eating food, it stimulates our digestive process. So we take a bite of food, it enters in the stomach. but the stomach actually waits until the pH gets low enough before it releases that food into the small intestine. So in order for the small intestine to not be destroyed, basically burned by the stomach acid, it needs to be neutralized, which is where bile comes in, and also sodium bicarb. Now, if there's not enough bile to be released in the small intestine to neutralize the acidity from the stomach, then the body will decrease the amount of stomach acid production. So the body says, hey, wait a minute, there's too much stomach acid, right? And then decreases the amount of the stomach acid production. Therefore, low stomach acid means low bile flow. And another name for low bile flow is cholestasis. So not only is low stomach acid related to poor digestion, it's also a gateway for microorganisms. So similar to how stagnant water builds up algae and fungi and bacteria and things, when you have low levels of stomach acid, you're not having proper flow, and you're also not in the right pH. So this is where we can start to see things like SIBO type conditions start to develop. So the lack of bile motility can actually be caused from a number of things, including, which we'll talk about some of them, but which can include thyroid, candida, fungus, mold, parasites, a lot of these things we talk about, right? Glyphosate. So there are a lot of causes, and a few of them we're going to be touching on today. So under cholestatic conditions, which is that decreased bile flow that we were talking about, the renal elimination becomes the main route for bile acid detoxification, meaning that the toxins are going to be sent out through the urine. And the safest route for elimination for our body is actually through the bowels, which coincidentally, right, is the first part of our drainage pathway that we want to work on, the colon, right? So the results of bile duct dysfunction include intestinal inflammation. You can get changed gene expression in the gut, leaky gut, which often you hear leaky gut, leaky brain, right? Your altered gut microbiome, increased insulin resistance, damage and loss of our microvilli. And so within our lining, right, like, and that's going to cause decreased nutrient absorption and gut biome diversity, dysbiosis. So there's a lot going on all at once that, you know, we really need to pay attention to. Now, from a functional medicine standpoint, when you hear people talk about low stomach acid, or people who might be presenting with some of those symptoms, you'll hear people say things like, oh, just drink some apple cider vinegar. And that's really to help bring up those levels. But from treating a root cause standpoint, what we actually need to do is to get the bile flowing better. And we're going to talk about how we can make that happen. So another thing that's important is to realize that bile is not just a detergent molecule. It plays a key role in fat digestion and in intestinal absorption of hydrophobic compounds, which include fat-soluble vitamins, right? So examples of fat-soluble vitamins are going to be your vitamin D, right? Your vitamin K2, vitamin E and A. So if you have a deficiency in those vitamins, it could be related to bile issues. So the bile really does play a key role in the intestinal absorption of key vitamins. And in addition to absorption of the vitamins, it also delivers vitamins to the small intestine, right? Including things like, folic acid, vitamin B9, right? Vitamin B12 and some others as well, right? So it is also a route of excretion of trace minerals. So a lot of these things that we talk to when we're talking detoxification, right? So including things like arsenic, copper, manganese, lead, mercury, selenium, silver, zinc, right? We talk about these kind of things and how we're going to be eliminating the toxins from our body, right? So Another important thing that we can touch on is cholesterol when it comes to the liver, right? So cholesterol, steroid hormones or sex hormones, right? Like estrogen, prolactin, insulin, and other important substances like that are also excreted in the bile. So high cholesterol, you guys, can actually be an indicator of bile issue or dysfunction, right? And 70 to 80% of cholesterol is used for bile acid production. So cholesterol actually gets converted into bile acid. So if someone has high cholesterol, they're likely not making enough bile acids, right? And when we're talking about bile acids, there are actually aggressive bile acids that can cause oxidative stress, apoptosis, and others are hepatoprotective or liver protective bile acids, including UDCA or TUDCA, which might sound familiar because one of the products from Cellcore is TUDCA. So TUDCA is protective and not just to the liver, but also to other organs, including the brain, kidneys, and the placenta. So here's another image that I feel like is helpful for seeing the connection between the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and small intestine, or duodenum, as you can see labeled on here. So you can see at the very bottom of the common bile duct there is the sphincter of Oddi. Now, the sphincter is what controls the release of everything being transported from the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Now, certain hormones can actually alter the opening of the sphincter of Oddi. So estrogen, for example, can inhibit the opening of that sphincter. So I feel like this is really important because many of you that I've worked with have had blood panels done and know your hormone levels. So you can start to see how this starts to interact. Your hormones are interacting with different organs, right? So high levels of estrogen, or maybe being estrogen dominant, if maybe you've been told you're estrogen dominant, can actually inhibit the opening of the sphincter of Oddi. And therefore the release of bile, or things that we talked about as well, right? Like the bicarbonate or pancreatic hormones, right? So this would essentially be an estrogen-induced cholestasis, which is decreased bile flow secondary to high estrogen levels, right? So the sphincter of Oddi also contains receptors for thyroid hormones. So many of you that I work with have thyroid conditions. So you might think about these kind of things too, which is this sphincter actually relaxes, right? So it's going to be relaxing and opening in a response to thyroxine, which is T4. So that's going to allow bile and other contents from the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, right, to be released into the small intestines. And I haven't talked a lot about the pancreas because I feel like the pancreas can really be its own topic altogether, but you've got to think about all of the hormones also that come through there that are released from the pancreas that are just so important. So those are other things kind of to consider as well, right? So when the thyroxine, the T4 is lacking, as in hypothyroidism, right, then the sphincter of Oddi may remain contracted, and without the open sphincter kind of, right, and free flowing bile, it can sit stagnant, which, as we talked about earlier, can create this kind of gateway to microorganisms and create conditions where even you get common bile duct stones, right? Gallstones, right? Which come from this stagnant bile in the ducts. So this can overall lead to backup, which can further lead to systemic issues, which we're going to touch on as well. So these are just a few examples that really show how intricate and interrelated our systems are and how important our hormones are in these systems. And our hormones just play such a pivotal role. And I think it just really shows the importance of trying to find the root cause, right? And just dig a bit further into that root cause. So kind of putting this all together, let's look at the drainage funnel image here. And when you look at this image, just below the liver bile duct section, you can see a box off to the left containing this skin, the kidneys, and the lungs. And this is the overflow box. So when the colon is backed up, then the buildup happens above the funnel, right? And when the liver bile duct area is backed up, there's a release of an emergency valve, which is called the blood bile barrier. And so when this valve opens up, bile acids and toxins will get into the blood, which means it's in our systemic circulation. And then that affects the skin and the kidneys and the lungs. So reactions, skin reactions, right? Like itchiness, pruritus, right? Redness, rashes, those kind of things in your kidneys, maybe problems with urination, the lungs, hay fever, asthma, things like that. So think about the liver bile duct and ensure that you're really working on opening those drainage pathways and appropriately detoxifying parasites and toxins, right? So on a final note, I just want to shift into the importance of ATP before we wrap this up. Since we talk a lot about ATP, right, and the mitochondria ATP production, I found it really interesting that ATP and bile flow are connected. And so it was shown experimentally that the extent of hepatic injury, right, liver injury, can actually be assessed by monitoring bile flow rate, which reflects the level of ATP, and therefore an increase in ATP showed an increase in bile flow. So you must be thinking right now about BCATP, right, at this point. And this is just one of the reasons that you hear people rave about how amazing BCATP is. And for those of you who haven't moved into Cellcore yet, BCATP is one of the favorite, I guess, you know, it's like, it's one of those favorite supplement lines that people just really love and get really great results with. So hopefully there have been some really great aha moments, and this is all starting to kind of come together for you now. And you can see how each of the Cellcore products are strategically placed in the protocol to help you support your organs and bodily systems through each of the phases in the funnel system, right? Okay, so when it comes to liver and bile drainage, with the use of Cellcore products and protocols, I'm a real believer in following the comprehensive protocol. So I think that it's really the most effective way, but I also think it's going to be the best bang for your buck in the long run. So in phase 2, right, we're already starting to work on liver and bile drainage, right? And so you can see the advanced TUDCA is introduced in this phase, right? Which I mentioned earlier. I talked about advanced TUDCA a little bit earlier, right? So this is really going to help promote the healthy bile flow. It's going to support our liver health, both of which are really important for optimizing the body's natural drainage and detoxification process, right? Then we're going to have BCATP, which I was talking to you about as well, which continues from phase 1. So you see the BCATP appear in phase 1, right? It assists the body with your ATP production, which is your energy for your organs in your body, right? And then we're going to have our para 1, which is the mimosa pudica seed, which really helps to promote elimination of waste and toxins through the GI tract, our gastrointestinal tract. Then we have para 2, which helps to enhance our digestive function with herbs that are traditionally used to promote detoxification in the gut. And then we have our biotoxin binder, also a continuation from phase 1. So biotoxin binder is our binding agent, and it really lends to increased support in the gut microbiome, which in turn supports our healthy digestion and our immune health, right? And just a little note that the Cellcore products are formulated with the carbon technology, and the carbon technology is really a proprietary blend of the fulvic acids and polysaccharides that really help to support our cellular repair and the body's natural ability to detoxify. So it has a low pH in the carbon technology, which really helps protect the ingredients from being digested by the stomach acid. So they remain intact as they actually enter the desired location of the body. So all the Cellcore product line is formulated with carbon technology, with the exception of the para 1, para 3, and the IS line, which you'll find down in phase 5. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for joining me here. I'm going to be making a video for my clients in my wellness studio on all of the steps that are going to be involved in performing an effective liver flush, including the steps for a coffee enema. So I'm excited to be partaking in that. And you guys, since everybody is different, everybody is different, you guys, I always recommend working with a Cellcore practitioner to ensure that you can complete a proper intake form so that you can work on your goals that are specific to you and your body. So if you're not already working with me, but you'd like to be working with me, my accolades and contact information are available below, as is my practitioner's link if you're ready to get started. So I'm looking forward to connecting, and we'll chat soon.